If you want to improve your sprinting and get more aerodynamic, you could do far worse than copy some of the world's best sprinters. However, many of them have very different positions. So which one is best?
We're going to take a look back at the top sprinters of the last 10 years and try and emulate their positions. From Mark Cavendish, who kind of pioneered that aero position, to GREIPEL's mega powerful, hulking great position that he adopts. And then, if I can get into Caleb Ewan's torpedo position, we're going to try that as well.
Yeah, brace yourselves. It's time for GCN Does Science.
I'm quite excited about this, Ollie.
Yeah. To test out the different positions has GCN's best sprinter,
Hang on, I'm going to stop you there. I'm pretty sure at GCN I'm the only sprinter.
Yeah, well, anyway, Chris is going to jump in the wind tunnel and test the different positions. And to do this, we've come to the Boardman Performance Centre, where Dr. Xavier DIsley of AeroCoach is going to help us perform the testing and analyse the results. AeroCoach are a company that specialise in optimising the aerodynamics of amateur and pro athletes.
I'm quite excited about this, but the only fear I have is I'm going to find out how much better I could have done when I was actually racing.
Probably quite a lot.
I think so too.
Good to see you, Zav.
Nice to see you, Ollie.
Thanks for helping us with the testing today. So, what is the procedure that we're going to do to measure Chris in the different positions?
So in a wind tunnel, what we do is we pull the air past the rider. Most people think that you might be blowing air at a rider in the tunnel, but in actual fact the fan is on the right hand side over here, and there's an inlet, which is a big sort of open expansion which allows us to pull the air past the rider. There's a round section where the rider's placed on a platform, which is effectively a measuring platform. So as the air hits the rider, it transfers force into the platform. We measure that force and then calculate an aerodynamic drag.
Nice. So how accurate is this test going to be?
So a wind tunnel is one of the most accurate ways you can measure aerodynamic drag. Chris isn't going to be going full bore when he's doing his sprinting because it is a precision piece of equipment. But normally you look at something like 0.5%. So it is a very, very accurate way of measuring it.
Nice. So because Chris can't go full bore, it's all right. What we're going to do is actually do a second part of the experiment out on the road where you do get to go.
Nice. Test out the positions in real life.
Yeah. But also, I think in addition to doing the 3 sprinters' positions, we should also do the Chris OPIE and see how that compares.
The flailing around everywhere, hoping for the best.
Right. Let's get in the tunnel.
I'm genuinely, seriously excited because I've never been in a wind tunnel before, and I've always felt like I paid attention to trying to be really aero and really fast on my bike. So I'm now finally going to get the chance to see if I was wasting my time or if those efforts really did pay off. It's kind of like being in a Formula One environment. I'm quite excited about it.
First up is my own sprint position, which is kind of the position I would have adopted as I was dying towards the finish line. So in the final 100 metres of a bike race, after I've stood up, you know, I'd end up sitting back down, elbows out, ready to lunge.
So the OPIE sprint position, which was seated but with elbows out, the elbows out was costing you 32 watts at 65 kilometres an hour, which is a fair amount. As a percentage of the kind of wattage you'd be putting out, because if you're doing 1,000 watts, 1,200 watts, it's, 3% odd of the power. So
it's quite a lot actually when you say 3%.
Right, next up is the aerodynamic position that Mark Cavendish kind of brought onto the scene 2007. Here we go.
When we did the Cavendish position, right, so that was the one where you were slightly further forwards but not like massively over, but looking straight at the stem, 128 watts faster than seated in the drops. So that's suddenly someone who's done their sprint training over the winter and someone who hasn't done their sprint training.
That'll be why I always beat you, mate.
Yeah, I actually remember quite clearly pulling out to overtake him in a race, like 150 metres from the line, and then the surface changed on the road, and he went forwards, and I was like, boom, like I had an air brake on.
Giving my triceps a little bit of a rest now, and I'm going to get myself right down far into the Caleb Ewan position, right over the front of the bike. Here we go. So that was the Caleb Ewan position, and I can honestly say I have no idea how he does that. My arms, my shoulders are killing me.
The Caliburn position, 248 watts.
Oh, wow.
More aerodynamic.
That's huge.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely
insane.
massive. You can afford to lose, 10% of your power
Yeah.
and still gain 10%, even more depending on what power you're doing.
I might
Go
even be
faster.
able to sprint if I do the Caliburn position.
Exactly.
Gives us all hope, Ollie.
We're going to adopt the position of the most powerful sprinter of the last 10 years, and that's GREIPEL. Big, powerful position for him.
The GREIPEL position was a little bit. It was basically the same as the OPIE position.
Yeah, but GREIPEL had 600 watts more than I do.
He did, yeah. So, but he was that was 28 watts, 27.5 watts slower than us being seated in the drops, which is a kind of a good position, like a base position to work from. You had to go a bit more extreme to go faster than that. But it just goes to show the massive percentage improvements you can get just from changing your sprinting position.
Sadly, it's come 2 years too late for me.
Just think how good you could have been.
I think about that every morning.
Well, I think it's all good and well seeing that and doing it like that, but we need to go and test it out on the road.
How much faster can I actually go? Yeah, I'm
and see
quite looking forward to that.
how easy it is to do these positions in real life.
Let's go somewhere warm and sunny though, because it's wet outside.
Well, I think the GCN teleportation budget is back, so we could just teleport somewhere.
So as we've said, it's all well and good doing these sprint positions in the safety of the wind tunnel, but it's a completely different thing doing them for real out on the road.
Yeah, for a start, you've got to try and control the bike at speed whilst delivering a max effort. It's going to be difficult, Ollie.
Yeah, well, we thought what better reason than to come out to these beautiful flat roads in Mallorca and give it a go, and by us, I mean you.
Okay.
So we're up to 50 k's an hour. And I'm just going to do my own thing, my own sprint that I've done thousands of times over the years. Go for a max effort and see how many watts and how many kilometers an hour I can produce. Next up is one of the most effective positions over recent years. It's Mark Cavendish. Very aero, but still very powerful, and you cannot argue how quick he's been over the years. Okay, we mentioned before we got a bit of a tailwind here, and the reason I'm kind of smiling through the pain is I got 76 k's an hour, which, I don't do in training. So the most I've ever done by myself was 73.6. I know that pretty clearly. So to get 76.1, it makes me pretty happy. I didn't feel all that safe with the tucked in elbows. I didn't have the same control over the bike that I've always liked to have. But as we know, my position wasn't that fast, which probably explains my results. So next up we have the GREIPEL, the big, powerful sprint position of the German rider. So for me personally, I felt like I got that one a little bit wrong, maybe a little bit undergeared. We do have a tailwind here today, and I got a 52.11, and for that sort of speed, a 53 does actually make a big difference. But either way, GREIPEL would have absolutely smashed me. The Caliburn position, the only one that's made me feel a little bit nervous, if I'm honest. The other three, they're quite similar, but also they're quite simple, and my nose is nowhere near my tyre. Whereas this one, I'm a little bit nervous I might end up with a black stripe on my nose. So, 55 k's an hour roughly, 50. Said 52 just then. One more corner to go. So about 150 meters until I start my sprint, the final one. That's all about getting forward and down. All right. sensations. It felt mega fast. I'm less out of breath because I couldn't pedal harder, and it felt sketchy. But it's definitely effective if you have less power and want to go fast. Although, having said all of that, I don't think I'd recommend doing it. Certainly not on the open roads or anywhere near anyone else.
We're back at base now, and Chris has looked at his data from the sprints.
I have.
So tell us what the peak powers were and stuff and things like that.
Okay, so the peak powers for all of the sprints varied between 1200 watts in the Caleb Ewan position to, let's have a look, 1483 in my position, which is natural. You'd expect me to put out more power in the position that I trained in for years.
Yep.
The average power for all the sprints, and this is what surprised me the most actually, the average power for all of the sprints was within 20 watts. So they were all just over 1,000 watts for the 20 seconds roughly that I sprinted. So between 320 meters and 340 meters, which is quite a long sprint.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I'm surprised by that because I genuinely thought in that Caleb Ewan position, I'd have been well down.
So your peak power was less in the Caleb Ewan position, but
Yep.
you're still able to get the same average power out.
Yes, but in that's why I think the Caleb Ewan position wasn't the fastest one for me.
Right.
So the Cavendish position ended up being quite a bit faster than all of the others actually.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm getting towed in by the motorbike up to 50 kilometers an hour and then I'm sprinting from there. But I think the fact that I'm able to accelerate really, really hard in the Cavendish position, just a few watts below my own personal peak, invests that initial snap and that speed in the sprint, which you're then able to build on and maintain towards the end of it. Whereas you miss that with the Caleb Ewan position because you're over 200 watts down. So you don't get that initial acceleration which gets you through those first few kilometers an hour acceleration.
Well, you don't, but
maybe he does, yeah.
I think, well, the other thing is, although the Caleb Ewan position is by far the fastest aerodynamically, and you can still get some good power out in it, it is important to say that we wouldn't recommend anyone goes and tries to replicate that down at their local criterium.
I mean, out of all of those positions, having your nose that far away from the tyre is a little bit unnerving.
Yeah, I was a bit unnerved watching you do it.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing as, Danny McCaskill, you watch him do some amazing stunt, but you don't then think, well, I'm going to go and try and balance on that beam above a bridge as well. Because, it's the same thing, isn't it?
That's a pretty good point. So if you want to try and replicate one of these positions, then it's the Cavendish one to go for because you're still strong, you're still locked in, but because you've got your elbows tucked in and your head down and your shoulders down, you are going, what is it called, the Manx missile? Yeah. You can see where he got that name from.
Yeah. Well, I think the big question we have to ask from seeing this and see you do it is, knowing what you know now from this data and the aerodynamics.
I can see where this is going.
If you had your time again, would you have changed your sprinting position?
I think I'd be foolish not to. Like, when you see it so clearly put on paper like this, then if I didn't do something to adapt my position and try and work on getting myself faster and more compact, I would be a fool. So yeah, I would try and replicate the Cavendish position if it was my time again.
How does that make you feel, knowing that you could have been faster?
Well, it just reassures what I've been telling people for years. I'm better than I look.
Well, you heard it here first. I mean, on that bombshell, I think, well, I hope you've enjoyed this video.
I enjoyed it, Ollie. It's been a good experience.
Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you'd like to watch another video on sprinting, well, click on Chris.